back to the beginning so people understand what in the world does a general surgeon have getting interested in nutrition. And
Yes.
I mean, I was born on an Aberdeen Angus beef farm and grew up on a dairy farm and a beef farm. And I was a confirmed cholesterolholic. When I returned from Vietnam as a combat surgeon and was asked to join the staff at the Cleveland Clinic, I shortly thereafter became chairman of our breast cancer task force and head of the section on thyroid and parathyroid surgery. But it was in my role as chairman of the breast cancer task force that I became increasingly disillusioned with the fact that for no matter how many women I was doing breast surgery, I was doing absolutely nothing for the next unsuspecting victim. And that led me to a bit of global research, and it was quite striking to see that there were many other nations and cultures where breast cancer rates were 30 and 40 times less frequent than the United States. And if you were to look at rural Japan in the 1950s, breast cancer was very infrequently identified. And yet, as soon as the Japanese women would migrate to the United States, by the second and third generation, still pure Japanese American, they now had the same rate of breast cancer as their Caucasian counterpart. And even more perhaps profound was cancer of the prostate. In 1958, in the entire nation of Japan, how many autopsy-proven deaths were there from cancer of the prostate? 18. The most mind-boggling public health figure I think I've ever heard. By 1978, 20 years later, they were up to 137, which still pales in comparison to the 28,000 who will die of prostate cancer this year in this country. So somewhere along the line of this investigation, it just seemed to me that there would be more bang for the buck if we could look at cardiovascular disease, because here was the leading killer of women and men in Western civilization, which in multiple cultures that I was encountering was virtually non-existent. And I guess the dream became this: if we could get people to eat to save their heart, then they would also diminish greatly the likelihood of acquiring the common Western cancers of breast, prostate, colon, and pancreatic. So that's where this next led me to do this research. And we had patients who were, it was a small group, about 24, because that was the number in 1985 that I could handle and still fulfill my surgical obligations. And these 24 patients were quite seriously ill with heart disease. They had failed their first or second bypass. They had failed their first or second angioplasty. They were too sick for these procedures, or they had refused. And 5 were told by their expert cardiologist they wouldn't live out the year. Well, those 5 all made it beyond 20 years. And it was really beginning to be quite striking to see how not only was the disease halted, but we began to see elements of disease reversal. And so that really led me to decide that when I retired from surgery, this was just too exciting to give up. So today, I still work at the Cleveland Clinic Wellness Institute, where I direct the cardiovascular disease prevention and reversal program. And somebody who comes to us who's already had a heart attack, they don't want another one. They've been told they have to have a stent. They don't want to have the stent, or maybe they don't want to have their second or third stent. Or maybe they've been told they have to have a bypass. They don't want it. Or they've had a bypass. They don't want another one. And these patients tend to be very appreciative and very motivated to want to significantly change their lifestyle to halt and to begin to reverse this disease. The other category that we have to think about are those who are about to become the next persons who come down with cardiovascular disease. And there it's a little harder sell, because right now they're so naturally addicted to the Western diet, which looks delicious, tastes delicious, smells delicious, and while it is hurting you, it's not giving you pain. And we're asking you to trade that type of diet for whole food plant-based nutrition, which looks delicious, smells delicious, tastes delicious. Now, what are some of the background data on all of this? let's start with the youth. So if we look at the autopsy studies sadly on our GIs, who in the Korean conflict died of combat, at autopsy, 80% of those average 20-year-olds already had gross evidence of coronary artery disease you could see without a microscope. Not enough for a cardiac event yet, but there it was, the disease was established at that age. That study was then repeated, actually 45 years later. This time looking at young women and men between the ages of 17 and 34 who had died of accidents, homicides, and suicides. And now the disease is ubiquitous. Not enough for their cardiac events, but here you can see if they continue to eat that way, now by their 40s and 50s and 60s, we now begin to see those cardiovascular events, which are sort of the, the final eruption of an illness that they have been developing since they were children. Now, probably it's important to go a little farther with the science, because this is what makes it a lot easier for people to transition. We're all experts would be in agreement, and that is where this disease has its inception and its onset and its beginning is when we progressively injure that delicate innermost lining of the artery called the endothelium. What makes the endothelium so truly remarkable is the fact that it produces a magic gas, nitric oxide, which is responsible for the salvation and the protection of all of our vasculature. For example, because of its remarkable functions. One, nitric oxide keeps all the cellular elements within our bloodstream flowing smoothly like Teflon rather than Velcro. It keeps things from getting sticky. Number two, nitric oxide is the strongest blood vessel dilator in the body. When you climb stairs, the arteries to your heart, the arteries to your legs, they widen, they dilate. That's nitric oxide. Number three, nitric oxide will prevent the wall of the artery from becoming thickened, stiff, or inflamed, protect us from high blood pressure or hypertension. Number four, now this is the absolute key. A safe and normal amount of nitric oxide will protect us all from ever developing blockages or plaque. So literally everybody on the planet, whether they are from Berlin, London, Chicago, New York, or Colorado, if they have developed cardiovascular disease, it's because in all the preceding decades, they have now so sufficiently trashed, injured, and compromised the capacity of their endothelial cells to make nitric oxide. They don't have enough to protect themselves from making blockages and plaque. However, the good news here, this is not a malignancy. This is a completely benign foodborne illness. And once you can have those patients understand what are the foods that every time they pass their lips, they absolutely trash further an already train-wrecked endothelium. And when they stop, the endothelium recovers. It now, once again, makes enough nitric oxide. So not only is the disease halted, but we often see elements of disease reversal. Now, the natural question is, what are these foods that every time they pass our lips, we injure the endothelial cells? They are any drop of oil, olive oil, corn oil, soybean oil, safflower oil, sunflower oil, coconut oil, palm oil, oil in a cracker, oil in a piece of bread, oil in a salad dressing. Oil injures the endothelial cells, as does anything with a mother or face: meat, fish, chicken, fowl, turkey, eggs, and anything that is dairy: milk, cream, butter, cheese, ice cream, and yogurt, and sugary drinks, Pepsis, Coke, and sugary foods, cakes, pies, cookies, stevia, agave, excesses of maple syrup, molasses, and honey, here in medicine, we really have to sort of hang our heads in recognition of the fact we have made a billion-dollar health industry here around an illness that does not even exist in half the planet. And I would be remiss if I've told you how we can reverse heart disease, but in the last 30 years, rubbing elbows with kindred spirits who have been involved in this activity as well, it truly is becoming apparent that never before in medicine have we had anything so powerful, so safe, and economically realistic, because it doesn't cost anything, as whole food plant-based nutrition. Why do I say that? Because literally, not only does it eliminate cardiovascular disease, but also strokes and vascular dementia and diabetes and hypertension and ulcerative colitis and Crohn's disease and rheumatoid arthritis, lupus, multiple sclerosis, allergies, asthma, and the list goes on. That if we could get people to stop eating meat, and if we could get people to become plant-based in their foods, we would eliminate 1/3 of early mortality. The reason I'm so passionate about medicine today is we're truly on the cusp of what could be a seismic revolution in health. And this seismic revolution is never going to come about with another pill, with another procedure, or an operation. But this seismic revolution will come about when we in the profession have the will and the grit and the determination to show patients or persons not only the lifestyle, but most specifically, the nutritional literacy that will empower them as the locus of control to absolutely annihilate chronic illness.